Hello. For my first Fun Facts project, I have selected to talk about Johann Sebastian Bach from the Baroque period, and the composition I'll be talking about here is his Brandenburg Concerto Number 5 in D major. Bach was born in Eisenach, Germany in 1685 from his father Johann Ambrosius Bach and his mother Maria Elizabeth Lammerhurt, who both passed away when Bach was 9 years old. Bach was incredibly driven to learn about music from the age of 9. He was taught to play the clavichord by his brother Johann Christoph, and after learning the simple pieces that his brother taught him, Bach persistently demanded more difficult works to learn, showing a strive for greatness early on in his life. In 1717, after Bach began serving as a composer at the court of the Prince of Anhalt-Köthen, at the age of 32, Marquand, a French virtuoso, visited Dresden to play for the King Elector to Poland. Jean-Baptiste Volumeyer, a concertmeister at Dresden and acquaintance of Bach, arranged a contest between Marquand and Bach. A concert was assembled in the house of Marshal Count Fleming to facilitate this competition, and although Bach showed up on time and ready to perform, Marquand did not appear as he fled Dresden before the competition. Bach then proceeded to perform alone for the audience and received much praise for his performance. In 1723, at the age of 38, Bach was appointed as cantor at the St. Thomas Church in Leipzig, Germany. 6 years later, in 1729, Bach began directing the Collegium Musicum at the Zimmermann's Coffee House, which was also in Leipzig. Bach continued to perform both of these roles for 12 years, when in 1741 Gottfried Zimmermann died and the coffee house was closed. Bach continued his role in the St. Thomas Church until his death in 1750. Here are some facts about Bach's composition, Brandenburg Concerto Number 5. This song is written in 3 parts, as is typical of concertos. The first movement is a fast and bright allegro movement, followed by a slow and introspective affettuoso movement, then finishing with another allegro movement. Both the first and last allegro movements are written in a bright D major key, and the middle affettuoso movement is written in a much more somber B minor key. The structure of the third allegro movement is in a ternary ABA form, with a D major opening, B minor middle section, and a return to D major in the end. The dominant instruments in this piece are the violin, the flute, and the harpsichord. A harpsichord having a leading presence as the main soloist in concertos was very unusual for the Baroque period. This was an experimentation likely driven by Bach's passion for this instrument. This concerto has 2 versions, an earlier version, BMV 1050A, and the later BMV 1050. The later iteration expanded on the harpsichord's role in the song and added a cello line in its accompaniment. There's a harpsichord solo at the end of the first allegro with a very virtuosic and contemporary feel, similar to the cadenzas seen later in the classical era. This may have been the first harpsichord solo ever written for a concerto. The Brandenburg Concertos were dedicated to Christian Ludwig, the Margrave of Brandenburg, in 1721, but never performed during Bach's lifetime. These concertos stayed in Ludwig's library and were lost until they were rediscovered and published by Siegfried Den in 1850. I've heard Bach's music described as approachable for modern listeners, and I believe this concerto exemplifies that. My ear is particularly drawn to the presence of the flute and the harpsichord in this piece. The flute creates so much emotion throughout the movements, and the leading harpsichord demonstrates a magnificent amount of skill and passion for keyboard instruments. For the first act, I love the closing harpsichord solo. The other instruments become completely silent, and the spotlight shines fully on the strings. The harpsichord fires a barrage of lattice trills with great control on the speed, alternating between fast and slow parts. The second act gives us an emotional moment to relax and reflect on the fast and complex section that preceded it. The harpsichord continues to take a leading role progressing through the song as the flute and the violin enter and exit the piece to communicate with each other. The structure of this part gives a feeling of the harpsichord being the main character, who is given various counterpoints to reflect on by his two companions, almost as if something is being worked out. After the somber second act comes to a close, the redemptive sounding third act comes into play. The song re-enters the major key, and the flute and the violin play a much more consistent role in this act. I'm particularly drawn to a moment in the middle of this act where the main theme is repeated by the flute and the violin a few times, with each repetition increasing in volume as the harpsichord takes a rare back seat with repeated chords that provide structure. The tension continues to build until its release, with the violin playing longer, more calm notes, giving space for the harpsichord to play more varied, expressive notes. In summary, it's incredible that these pieces were not lost to time, and these concertos, as well as other works by Bach, such as the Little Fugue in G minor, have given me a much deeper appreciation for music from the Baroque period. Citations referenced in the beginning of this video on screen will be listed in the description below, and thank you for watching.